Let's continue this now to the next part of this chapter. We are looking at boundaries of sustainability. The scientific community has been trying to both describe our sustainability challenges and suggest ways to address them, at least since the enlightenment of Grover 2007. For instance, Thomas Malthus describing the challenge of population growth when suggesting that the power of population is indefinitely greater than the power in Earth to produce subsistence for man. Or the first calculations of human-induced climate change by Svante Arrhenius a century later in 1896. However, our contemporary sustainability challenges are best described by a group of influential researchers calling themselves Earth System Scientists and proposing a set of 9 planetary boundaries within which there is a safe operating space for humanity. Unfortunately, we are already exceeded at least 3 of them, and I'll show a figure claiming that we have exceeded 6 of them by 2023. So this work of Rockstrom et al. Here in the version shown in the book, it was a very 2009 Nature paper that has taken over the debate outside of the climate community in governments and so on, and has become kind of a nice infographic for the media people as well. Planetary boundaries for sustainability here, looking at, I'll come to another version of this figure: climate change, ocean acidification, stratospheric ozone, nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, and biogeochemical flow in general for the boundaries. And you have global freshwater use, change in land use, and biodiversity loss, atmospheric aerosol loading not yet quantified, chemical pollution, So the green space here is considered safe operating space, and here nitrogen cycle, we are supposed to be already out of it by the time this paper was published, and as well with biodiversity loss. And here we are edging out of, we have come out of the safe operating space. We are making an impact here and here. This is obviously very eye-catching and kind of a summary of the global operating space as defined here. Then there are obviously fans like this author who loves it, and there are many who love it and use it all the time as implications or impugning us on the actions we are taking for our survival or beyond survival, for our good lives, and how we are impacting all these things. But there are also some criticisms in terms of what does it mean? So we'll come back to that. Algal blooms in the Bay of Finland. So if you look at specific things like chemical pollution, then the examples of eutrophication, where you have excess nutrients coming off of land because of human land use in agriculture, deforestation, urbanization, lawns, leaks from vehicles and so on, and creating massive blooms which cannot be chowed down by the zooplankton because blooms grow very rapidly because of excess nutrients, and then the dead phytoplankton or algae fall down, and the aerobic microbes consume them, respire them, and create oxygen minimum zones or hypoxia, anoxia, which kill a lot of the marine life. And so on. So there is evidence that these are expanding, increasing in seasons across the year, and occurring in more new places, and interacting with fisheries, with cyclones and warming of the ocean, deoxygenation, and so on. Water scarcity is already a pressing problem around La Paz in Bolivia. So we are carrying 2 messages: social change transformations are possible, and that humans have always dealt with water scarcity issues and have prevailed, and now we are growing in population quite rapidly, creating more and more uses for water in terms of industrial activities, mass production of food, even various other recreational activities and so on. So will we prevail? Will desalination begin to be realistic and non harmful or not deleterious to marine life and so on, and yet supply the water problem? Because if Earth is 70% of the surface area covered by the oceans, then why is there a water problem, and so on? So there are many questions associated with this. Just because there is a problem doesn't mean you have to stop. So freshwater use is a problem. Does that mean we have to stop using it, or do we have to keep looking for solutions in addition to managing the water resources as we go along? So the next figure is the donut-shaped framework, which is helpful in showing that there are a number of planetary and social boundaries that we must stay within for development to be sustainable. So this is how that looks: a safe and just space for humanity. So it adds the justice or equitable equity and other issues here. Of course, that those are important, because if you save the planet but not the humans, then have we really accomplished something, right? So here we are looking again the social foundations in terms of food, water, income, education, resilience, voice, jobs or agency, energy, social equity, gender equality, health, and then outside you have inclusive and sustainable economic development, which is what we are discussing in this course as a whole. And then you're thinking about safe and just space for humanity as a whole, and you're putting the planetary boundaries outside with climate change, freshwater use, nitrogen phosphorus cycles, ocean acidification, chemical pollution, atmospheric aerosol loading, ozone depletion, biodiversity loss, and land use change here. So Raworth also explicitly argues that doing so is particularly challenging because the social foundation and environmental ceiling are independent. Right? So this is what Herman Daly also says. We cannot think of society, environment, and economic growth as separate things with some sustainability as an intersection of these spheres, but that actually environment is the ceiling we have to worry about. For example, increasing food security by introducing or increasing the use of fertilizers may, without appropriate knowledge and care, lead to local disruptions in the nitrogen and phosphorus cycles that harm aquatic ecosystems that the poor are also dependent on, livelihood on fisheries and so on. Innovation is thus at the heart of sustainable development, as well as sharing and using new knowledge and solutions. We have been able to overcome many sustainability challenges in the past, but never before have they been so tightly linked to each other, making efforts to deal with one aggravating others. Right? So the feedbacks and the unintended consequences are always critical. What are the boundaries of the planetary boundaries themselves? This gets debated a lot, and you want social scientists to do this because climate scientists can jump on this and keep on using it without understanding the political or other socio-economic consequences and so on, like the 1.5 degree C target. We will say, oh, we are crossing it this year, but what exactly does it mean? Can a dictator take this and say, we are going to do this and that because we have crossed 1.5 degree C already? What are the impacts in your backyard? So there are many details. So this article in Science came out last year arguing that we have already crossed 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, whereas the paper in 2009 had said we had already crossed 3. So, there are more details added: biosphere integrity, genetic and functional, climate change with CO2 and radiative forcing, novel entities, which I won't get into. So you can see here safe operating space exists here. Some of them are not still well defined in terms of where we are for stratospheric ozone and atmospheric aerosol loading, and ocean acidification is still in the safe operating system despite a lot of noise being made at local scales because impacts have to be quantified. And if corals are being affected, then you have to look at corals that are not being affected and understand why some are being affected and some are not, and so on. So here you have transgressed the boundary and a high risk zone. We talked about risk, evolution of the concept of risk and disaster risk and so on. So what does this mean? Because this is a global integral. what does this mean in terms of local impacts, local actions, and how to bring about those actions at those scales. So many details to be filled in. Nonetheless, it's a very influential figure now, the planetary boundaries. This analysis by Bierman and Kim makes, it's a nice long review paper. You can read it, but I'll just read the summary points. The planetary boundaries framework has been influential in generating academic debate and in shaping research projects and policy recommendations worldwide. Good thing. Numerous studies have sought to further and refine and implement the planetary boundaries framework by downscaling planetary boundaries or applying the framework to global and national environmental assessments. So you're getting more local in the boundary layers, the planetary boundaries, and who is crossing where and why, and how it can be reversed or slowed down or whatever. The definition of a safe operating space for humanity has stimulated many social scientists and international lawyers to explore what planetary boundaries thinking could imply for the governance and the dominant paradigms of our time. So in the end, it's all comes down to social science and not natural science about climate change and its impacts and sustainable development and its impacts, right? Yet the framework has also come under heavy scrutiny and been criticized from both natural and social sciences, humanities scholars, as well as the broader public and policy community. In the end, the concept of planetary boundaries has shown its limitations in terms of political impacts and faces its own boundaries. Most importantly, it seems to lack support from the global south. This is always critical. These people who produce this from Stockholm, mostly well-intentioned, good people. Swedes have always led the ideas on sustainability from the Stockholm Conference of the 1970s. But when it is completely a framework developed by the global north, then global south has to always be careful and then maybe even suspicious, and lack of support just means they don't see how this affects them or how they are being compensated for not doing their part, let's say, and whether the boundaries were crossed mostly because of the rich countries' activities, the global north's exciting lifestyle. The experience with the planetary boundaries framework offers important lessons for the new Earth Commission with its work on setting Earth system targets. So as opposed to global warming targets, which have their own issues, Earth system targets come with more details, but still same issues of planning, strategizing, prioritizing, action, implementation, and so on, and financing. Future issues: more research is needed to explore implications of planetary boundaries for Earth system governance and dominant paradigms such as economic growth. Key research questions relate to the institutionalization, coordination, operationalization, and democratization of planetary boundaries. So I wanted to add this part not so much to oppose what the book is saying, but to give it a broader perspective of how things have evolved on these concepts of our sustainability boundaries after the book was published. We'll come back and make one more podcast reading the conclusion of the book. Okay, so I didn't want to rush that part, so I'll come back and read it at leisure in the next podcast if I can find a way to stop this one. Okay.